Imagine standing on a shoreline, watching a massive wave build up on the horizon. For years, immigration policy has felt like a series of these waves, constantly shifting, highly emotional, and incredibly complex. But what if we stopped looking at it purely through the lens of daily headlines, and instead looked at it as a high-stakes multiplayer game of chess? A game where every move, from a $70 billion enforcement bill to a sudden arrest at an airport gate, is a calculated strategic gambit designed to signal strength, deter opponents, and reshape the entire playing field.
That is exactly the right way to frame it. When you look at the executive orders issued on August 6th, it becomes clear that we are witnessing a massive coordinated push that goes far beyond simple policy adjustments. We are talking about a fundamental restructuring of how the state asserts its sovereignty. From targeting birthright citizenship and birth tourism to pouring unprecedented funding into local police collaboration, the sheer scale of these measures is staggering. It is an aggressive opening move in a very complex, repeated game of enforcement.
And it is a move that deliberately tests the absolute limits of executive authority. Take the focus on birthright citizenship, for instance. This isn't the first time a presidency has tried to chip away at this concept, and previous attempts have run straight into a brick wall at the Supreme Court. Why bring this highly contentious battle back to the forefront now, knowing the historical legal pushback?
Because in game theory, sometimes the battle itself is the payoff. By forcing a confrontation over birthright citizenship, the executive branch is sending what we call a credible commitment signal. They are telling their political base, the public, and sending countries that they are willing to challenge even the most deeply entrenched constitutional interpretations to secure the border. Even if the federal courts eventually step in and issue a stay, which they frequently do, the administration has already achieved a political victory by demonstrating an uncompromising stance. It is a classic signaling mechanism.
So, the litigation isn't necessarily a failure of the strategy, it is actually a built-in part of the game. The administration acts, advocacy groups sue, the courts intervene, and the cycle repeats. But what about the sheer financial muscle behind this? The Secure America Act earmarks around $70 billion for enforcement. That is a mind-boggling sum of money. Where is that capital actually going, and how does it change the calculus for people trying to cross the border?
That $70 billion is designed to turn the border into a high-tech, highly visible fortress. It funds massive increases in physical detention capacity, deportations, and direct support for local law enforcement agencies that agree to cooperate with federal immigration officers. When you inject that level of funding, you are trying to drastically alter the risk-reward equation for migrants. We are already seeing the immediate results of this push. A sharp drop in border apprehensions and a historic tightening of refugee admissions, which have been capped at incredibly low levels and focused very selectively on specific groups, like Afrikaners.
It sounds like a total court press. But it is not just happening at the physical southern border, is it? The reach of these policies seems to have extended deep into the interior of the country, even to places you wouldn't traditionally think of as enforcement zones, like airport terminals.
Absolutely. The enforcement net has expanded dramatically. We are now seeing targeted arrests at airports for individuals whose visas have expired. This is a massive shift in tactics. Historically, overstaying a visa might have resulted in a bureaucratic notice or a future court date. Now, it can lead to immediate detention right at the gate. It is designed to show that no point of entry and no stage of the immigration process is exempt from scrutiny. Combine that with the systematic termination of temporary protected status, or TPS, for citizens of multiple countries, and you see a clear strategy of systematic exclusion.
It is a complete closing of the gates, both front and back. But let us talk about the economic engine that drives so much of this country: high-skilled labor. The H-1B visa program is the lifeblood of Silicon Valley and the broader tech sector. The new executive actions have introduced steep fee increases and overhauled the selection process itself. This has naturally triggered a wave of corporate lawsuits. How do employers fit into this game theory model?
Employers are critical players with a completely different set of payoffs. Their goal is to secure highly specialized talent at a predictable cost to remain globally competitive. By raising fees and complicating the selection process, the administration is effectively raising the transaction costs of hiring foreign workers. For the administration, this satisfies a domestic political demand to protect local jobs. But for employers, it feels like a direct threat to their business models. They are fighting back through the courts because, in their eyes, the short-term economic damage of losing access to global talent far outweighs any political argument about national sovereignty.
It is a fascinating clash of priorities. On one hand, you have the state prioritizing political signaling and border control. On the other, you have corporations prioritizing economic efficiency and talent acquisition. And then you have the tightening of the public charge rule, which essentially penalizes immigrants who might need temporary public assistance. It feels like the administration is trying to select only a very specific type of immigrant, while making the path as difficult as possible for everyone else.
Precisely. It is a shift from a humanitarian influence system to a highly transactional, defensive posture. By tightening the public charge rule, the state is sending a message. If you want to come here, you must prove you are entirely self-sufficient from day one, with zero safety net. It is a filter, designed to deter lower-income migrants. But we have to look at the broader systemic feedback loop. When you cut off legal pathways, restrict TPS, and make high-skilled visas prohibitively expensive, you don't necessarily stop the desire to migrate. You might just push it further underground, which in turn fuels the need for even more enforcement funding. It is a self-perpetuating cycle.
That brings us back to the core game theory logic you mentioned earlier, the repeated enforcement game. In this model, the federal executive is the primary actor, but they don't operate in a vacuum. They have to deal with what game theorists call veto players, namely the federal courts, sanctuary cities, and advocacy groups. How do these veto players disrupt the administration's plans?
Veto players are the friction in the machine. When the executive branch issues a sweeping order, advocacy groups immediately file lawsuits in favorable jurisdictions. Federal judges then issue nationwide injunctions or temporary stays. This forces the administration to pause, adjust its tactics, and try a slightly different angle. It is an iterative process, but here is the catch. The administration actually benefits from this friction. When a court blocks a policy, the executive can turn to its voters and say, "Look, we tried to secure the country, but activist judges in sanctuary cities stopped us." The political payoff of showing fight is often higher than the practical payoff of actually implementing the policy.
So, the conflict itself is the objective. It is a highly effective way to mobilize voters and send signals, even if the actual policy is tied up in legal limbo for years. But what about the human cost of this strategic game? We are talking about real people, families seeking asylum, high-skilled engineers trying to build careers, communities losing TPS status. When political payoffs override humanitarian or economic realities, what is the long-term societal cost?
That is the deepest, most troubling question of this entire landscape. When a state treats immigration policy primarily as a tool for domestic political signaling, the human beings caught in the middle become mere variables in an equation. The societal cost is a profound loss of trust and stability. When rules change overnight, when an airport gate becomes a point of arrest, and when families who have lived under TPS for decades suddenly face deportation, you erode the predictable legal environment that makes a society thrive. Furthermore, by alienating migrant-sending countries, you weaken the international cooperation needed to address the root causes of migration in the first place.
It seems we are moving toward a system where the rule of law is increasingly defined by executive decree and rapid-fire court battles, rather than comprehensive legislative compromise. Congress seems to have largely abdicated its role, leaving the executive and the judiciary to slug it out on the front lines.
Exactly. Congress has essentially stepped off the field, preferring to fund enforcement through massive bills like the Secure America Act, rather than tackling the incredibly hard work of systemic reform. This leaves us in a state of permanent instability. Every change in administration brings a total reversal of the chessboard, leaving individuals, businesses, and local communities struggling to adapt to a completely new set of rules every 4 to 8 years.
As we look to the horizon, it is clear that this high-stakes game is far from over. The August 6th executive orders have set a powerful, aggressive tone, but the counter-moves from the courts, states, and advocacy groups are already underway. It leaves us wondering, in a game where the rules are constantly being rewritten and the pieces are human lives, can anyone truly claim victory? Or are we simply locked in a perpetual cycle of escalation, where the only constant is uncertainty? Thank you for walking us through the complex mechanics of this modern political chessboard. To our listeners, we leave you with this thought. When the dust settles on the latest legal battle, What kind of society are we building when our most powerful tool of governance is the strategy of deterrence? Until next time, keep questioning the board, and thank you for listening.